Welcome to another episode of The Military Historian. I'm glad to have you back. Today I'm going to cover a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart since I recently lost my father a few years back. I remember hearing when I was growing up the phrase, the greatest generation. I know a lot of you have heard that phrase, and sometimes it registers, sometimes it don't. And particularly if you're young, you wouldn't know really what it means. But when you're my age at 64, you sort of see why it's important. Most people define the greatest generation as my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my father. But I had a conversation today with a good friend of mine named Stephen Kimbrough, and he redefined, I think, in my mind, what the greatest generation is. And I couldn't help but write it down because I thought it was that important. The quote of the day, one of our traditions. And I'm going to read it directly from what Kimbrough said to me. And this, in my mind, encapsulates the greatest generation of my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. And here's what it is. Because of their work ethic and the way that they never stopped, they truly believed in work as the ultimate expression of who they were. They lived and breathed work. They lived and breathed goals, setting goals, and meeting those goals and never backing down. And here's what the definition he gave me was, and I thought this was actually brilliant. Work is defined as a means to measure self-worth. Why does that have anything to do with the greatest generation? Well, the greatest generation, I think we can all agree, we're not slackers. That is just absolutely a fact that you could not get away from. And if you ever question their worth in this country and what they've done for this country, all you have to do is look at what they've done historically. They got us through 2 world wars, and won both of them, by the way, and the Great Depression and the Korean War. And all along the way, they were our guiding light. They set the values for us. They gave us each a lighthouse, per se, in which we could guide our lives and where we were headed. And they created values that we live by today. One of them was absolutely hard work. Pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. I know that's not even popular today, but I don't care. Pulling yourself up by the bootstraps is a necessity. It is not an option. Number 2, stick into what you believe in and never backing down. I don't care. If you believe in something, you stand by it to the end, and you never back down. Number 3, God, family, and country always become before politics or anything else. Absolutely true. God first, always. Family and country. Why do I bring this up? Let's start with country. My father served in the military, and he passed away a few years ago at 3 a.m, and he had COPD. One of the things that impressed me about my father was he went to the Gulf War, and he left November 15th or 16th of 1990. That was 2 days after he buried my Uncle Dean. He buried his brother and then went off to war. If you question, in my mind, the toughness of a man who will bury his brother, and by the way, he was close to his brother Dean, and then goes off to war, I think you're missing the whole point. He never shirked his duty. So when I was called up to go to Iraq, I didn't say no. I said, let's get this done. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Because my father set the example. I expect no less of myself. And I have a son. And I want him to see that example as well. And I have a daughter who I want her to understand. Your duty, your absolute duty is to country, God, and family. And it's an honor to serve all 3. I served in Iraq, and I would tell anybody out there that I was proud to serve and do my duty. Why? Because I had been taught that by a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather who fought 2 world wars, made it to the Great Depression, and looked me straight in the eye and said, "You do not back down or shirk your responsibilities." That's why they're the greatest generation in history. We got too many people who are entitled, who believe something is owed to them, who believe they don't have to go out and earn anything, who believe that it should automatically be theirs. Let me tell you what entitlement means to me. It means that you have missed the point and that you are selling yourself short. Why? Because there's only one thing that you do have a right to, the pursuit of happiness and freedom. And free speech is part of that, and all those other things that go with it. Those are the things that my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather all defended. That's what this generation defended. They defended the right to free speech, the right to all these things that are mentioned in the Constitution. That's why they're the greatest generation. Never once questioned the duty to their country, their God, and their family. Never once. And I never will either. If you don't want to sell yourself short, and I know you don't, most of the time most people don't, put something bigger in place of yourself. Never are you so big as to outlive or outthink or outgrow God. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You're never too big to outgrow God. You're never too big to outgrow your responsibility to your family, and you are absolutely never too big to outgrow your responsibility to your country. My father proved that. My Uncle Dean proved that. And my grandfather and my great-grandfather proved that. They fought their way through the Depression, and they showed that real men accept responsibility and they never shirk it. They never forget their family, never leave their family behind, and they never, ever shirk responsibility when it comes to country and God. So what I'm going to say to you today is this, and this is for people who question whether we should be fighting an administration. And this is where I really want to be careful. I don't know if I want to get into the politics, but I do want you to understand this. There's a way to do things and there's a way to not do things. And if you don't like this administration, you have a vote coming up in 3 more years. Vote them out. That's your legal right. That's your moral right. And as a matter of fact, it's your moral obligation to do so. But respect the country, respect the laws, and respect our traditions and culture. Go to the voting booth in 3 more years and get rid of who you don't want and elect in who you want. That is the American way. And I want every one of you who are listening, who question that and think that violence or no matter what means you use justifies the end. It does not. There is a way to do things, and there's a way not to do things. And the greatest generation understood that better than anybody. They respected their police officers. They respected their clergymen. They respected their politicians. They respected their bosses. They respected the people appointed over them. That's just the way it goes. And questioning things is okay, but doing it in the proper manner is something we can all take as an example from our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, and our fathers. If you speak to many people, they'll tell you that some of their fondest memories growing up are with their grandparents. They married for life, they stayed together for life, and they were devoted to family, always and forever. My greatest memories are my grandmother. She was part of that greatest generation. She took care of us. She was always there for us. And I can't ever say that I ever regret 1 minute of spending time with her. I miss her. I miss my grandfather. I miss every one of them. But I get to live on through them by living out their values every day. That's the opportunity you have to pass them on to your children. I have 2 children. Well, they're not children anymore. They're grown. They're grown men and women. A grown girl, a grown woman, and a grown man. And respectively, they have grown, and I have done my best to put in the work so that their values are going to help them through life. That's my role as a parent, and I never shirk that role, and I never will. So, that being said, I'm passing on whatever I learn and whatever I believe and whatever my grandfather and great-grandfather and father believed through them. That's the opportunity you have as a man, as a father, as a husband. It's a role you take seriously. And I would hope that if you already do, and I suspect that most of my audience does, because I kind of have an idea where my audience is leaning, I am never going to appreciate any of you. In fact, as a matter of fact, I'm in awe of anyone who can raise a family, work their entire lives, and support them, and make sure that the family has everything they need, and do it with a smile on their face. It's one of the most difficult things you will ever do in life. Let me repeat that. Raising a family, being a father and a husband, being responsible for other people, the most difficult thing you can ever do in life. But it's the most rewarding. It is. At any point while you're doing all of these things, you may not get the instant gratification or the thank you want at that time, but what you receive back is much more important. When you see a young man or woman that you've raised with good values, who actually believes in the right thing and does the right thing, you have succeeded. What did I just say? You put in, you get in what you put out. You put out what you get in. Simple as that. Okay? I put out to my children the values that my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather had taught me. And because of that, my children are better people for it. Maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the smartest bulb in the lot, but I don't have to be, because I'm learning from generations before me who taught me things that I personally probably would have never learned on my own. That's what we're here for. The greatest generation taught us things and showed us the way in a way that we never would have thought of. And they never took a day off. Not once. The greatest generation built this country. Everything that they did is on their backs. They built this country on their back, essentially. And they essentially raised it up and made it the country it is today. So if you ever want a role model, it may not be some pop singer or some current phase or current fad that may be out there on TV, and it may not be any of those. Here's who it should be. The greatest generation. Your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers, your fathers. They're the ones who put it on their back, the responsibility, and carried it every day for their entire lives. And they deserve respect, and they deserve to have their input in your lives. And they deserve to have the recognition that what they taught you was worth keeping. If you teach somebody something worth keeping, then they pass it on. You teach somebody something that's not worth keeping, it doesn't get passed on, and neither do your values, because you have none. Values are passed on. Beliefs are passed on. Moral integrity is passed on. And if you pass it on to the younger generation and your children and tell them to pass it on to their children, your grandchildren, and be there for each one of them, like my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather did, you'll have something that you can build on that'll last long after you're gone. There's an old phrase that I remember hearing and I remember seeing, and I actually used it in my script. Ideologies live on. People don't. So what does that mean? Whatever you taught them, whoever you sculpted them into being, lives on long after you're gone. They're your artwork. They're your greatest creation right there. Absolutely. Your children are your greatest creation. Put the work in. Be a present father and always try to teach them. Because every moment you do is a teaching moment. Every moment you have with them is a teaching moment. You're a mentor. That is what the greatest generation is. They're mentors. World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, the Korean War, and to some extent, the Vietnam War. Because every one of these soldiers and these service members, most of them had families to go back to. Most of them had kids, wives, but they did their duty. That is the hallmark of the greatest generation. That's a moral worth keeping. That's a moral worth following. That's a moral worth repeating. And you can do that through your children. So I'm just throwing this out. It's a thought. It's my thought. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thought in the world, but it is what I believe. And I want to put that out for you to decide if there's something in there worth keeping. If there's not, that's fine. We live in the greatest country in the world where disagreement is absolutely fine. You don't have to agree with everything I agree on. But what you do have to do is do the right thing for others around you. Okay? Some of you may see the right thing in a different way than I do, but you do have to do the right thing. That's the first test or litmus test you should have in dealing with any situation. Is it the most positive, and is it the right thing to do? If those two answers are no, then it is not. If it is yes, then follow your conscience. And I'm not speaking to Democrats or Republicans, conservatives or liberals. This has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with, I repeat, everything to do with the content of your heart. I think we all know who said that. And he was right on when he said it. Guess what? He was part of the greatest generation himself. I consider him a hero. That would be Martin Luther King, one of the greatest leaders in history. He's somebody we strive to be just like. Model yourself after your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your father, your mother, the greatest generation, and you'll never go wrong. And I say this with love and respect for each one of you. If you're already doing that, thank you. The country, the world, society owes you a debt. If you're not doing that, it's never too late. Any given day, you can choose to change the way you think. There's nothing wrong with changing things in midstream and going another direction. That's exactly what you should do. So, here's where I'm going to leave this at. For each and one of you that this hits home and it strikes a chord, thank you. Thank you for listening. For those who dismiss it, God bless you. You have your own set of values. And in America, we get to chase those values and exercise them as we see morally right to do so. And the last group of people who are indifferent, well, ask yourself why you're indifferent. That's all you have to do. Why are you indifferent? That's all I have to say about that, as Forrest Gump would say. And I'm going to leave it right here at this. If you like what you hear today, if it strikes a nerve, hit that like and share button. and join me for more episodes of The Military Historian.